Do you guys see? There it goes. Okay.
Yep.
I'm recording the meeting, and we'll kind of wait. There's 8-ball. So we did hear from Zach that he's not going to be at the meeting today. And who else are missing? Fred also is not on yet.
And Fred was going to join. He was going to pull away at 3 p.m. for the Tigegate statewide policy meeting, as am I. So
well as Greg, yes.
Yes.
We can go ahead and maybe start introductions, and by the end of that, maybe we'll have full house or fuller house. How do you usually do this? Just go down the line here?
Your choice. Yep.
Well, I'm just gonna start with myself. I'm Catherine Nordholm, the Fish Passage and Screening Coordinator here, and shepherding the House Bill 2298 rules through this process. So if you are not aware, this meeting is specifically dedicated to the House Bill 2298 rules, and then the subsequent meeting will go back to the fish passage rules that Greg has been shepherding through this process. So with that, I will just start on my list and go down and let the committee introduce themselves, and start with April.
Good afternoon, everybody. April Snell, Executive Director with the Oregon Water Resources Congress, representing water users. And before we go to the next person, I just want to highlight how nice Ken's picture is of the beach, and I find myself staring at it and wishing I was walking across it, but I do appreciate the picture, Ken.
And then thank you to April. Next on the list is Bill.
Oh, is that me?
That's you.
Yeah, okay, that's me. Good afternoon, everybody. Bill Cunningham. I'm a public member for the Fish Passage Task Force. I'm over here on the other side of the Cascades in Bend, Oregon.
And how about Kelly?
Yeah, I'm Kelly Moore, and I'm in Corvallis. I represent conservation and fishing interests, although you can say represent, but I'm not employed by any of them. So we're trying to work within the context of that without promoting any particular interest.
And then Ken?
Hi, Ken Beerley, on my phone again because my internet failed. I wish I was at the coast as well.
And Ken, who do you represent?
Usually myself, but it's general public.
Thank you.
Representation.
And then Steve? Is he here?
I haven't seen him on the list yet.
Yeah, I don't see him.
My list. That means he's not in the meeting yet.
Oh, he has a request to join, so I'll send that. No, it says it's calling him. Maybe he wasn't on there. Sorry, I guess I'm bugging him.
And I don't see anyone in the lobby, so sounds like Steve's not here.
Catherine, this is Greg. I just got a text message from Terry Turner, who is struggling with his computer getting into the Teams meeting, but it sounds like it's on his end and he's going to continue to try to troubleshoot, but he'll join us when he's ready.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and continue. I guess when they join, hopefully they'll just chime in. So we have sent out the agenda. I think this agenda is going to be a little bit flexible today because, as we mentioned, Greg and Fred will be leaving around 3. So why don't we go ahead and discuss the meeting minutes from the last meeting? Greg emailed out an edited version of the meeting minutes last Friday. So I wanted to take a moment to allow anyone to provide additional comments or edits to that. Or if nobody chimes in, we'll consider them good and move on.
Hey, Catherine, just in
Was
the
this for the October 24th meeting?
Yes. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
August 24th. I'm
Hey,
having a
Catherine.
problem with someone waiting in the lobby that is just not getting admitted.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I can't get him in either.
Wonder if I can. Pete, could you try to message him or something and see if he can leave and try to join again?
I'll see what I can do.
And as a reminder, we also have the phone number lower down on the Teams invite. If people are having issues with Teams, they can also just phone in. They miss out on the wonderful pictures and backgrounds, but they can be able to hear all of the communication if there's a way to get that to them.
Alan, this is Terry Turner. I'm calling in until I can get my Teams thing resolved on my end.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Terry. Admit. Yep, that's
Well, I'll
just
just
not.
jump in. I think the minutes look fine to me.
Thanks, Ken. Any other comments on the minutes? We'll consider those accepted and move on. My next point of business with the welcome introduction part of the agenda was to talk about how we're not making any decisions today or commitments. And so at the end of the meeting, I was going to revisit kind of the timeline for these rules, but we are hopefully going to be the last subcommittee meeting reviewing these rules and plan to take them to the task force on December 3rd now. And that's different from the last timeline that we kind of proposed where we were going to take them to the task force on October 15th. So there will be an updated timeline posted online. And that is just to give us some additional time to factor in comments from this meeting and have internal review. So that still gives us time to get them to the commission by March. And just a second, Teams isn't working. I have an email from another person. I'm not sure what to do about this.
What are you seeing, Catherine?
Rocky says that he is not able to get in either. And I still have someone waiting in the lobby that I haven't been able to let in.
Maybe for those folks, try maybe logging out of the Teams meeting and trying maybe to log back in. That may help. And Catherine, I just got a message from Steve Albertelli, who is not going to be participating today. He is unable to participate.
Forward this to people. See if we can get Rocky the phone number that he can call in. He might not have that. I'm not sure we post that online or if that's just in the invite. So. Okay. Moving on. First, let's see. I prepared a PowerPoint to kind of go over where we are now in terms of the rules development process for House Bill 2298. So I think maybe I will go ahead and share that. And if we continue having problems. Hopefully they can get kind of worked out on.
Catherine,
There
did you
is-
send the phone number to Rocky and Ben, the people that are having a hard time getting in? Did you send them the phone
Well,
number?
Let me try to do that real quick.
Was in the meeting invite, and we can put it in the chat if you want me to do that, Catherine, so you can continue.
Well, let me send this to Rocky real quick. I'm not sure if they have the invite.
And Greg, I don't know that they'll see the number in the chat if they can't get into Teams.
That's
Yeah,
a really
and-
good point, Alan. Thank you.
I don't have a way of getting hold of Ben.
I just got
Do we
the number
know-
for the Deschutes River Alliance. I'll try giving Ben a call there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me. Sorry. Start my. Terry made it on.
I think you're on mute, Terry.
Okay, sorry about
Yes.
that. And. Okay, you guys all see my screen now?
Yes.
Affirmative.
And it
Yes.
should be a PowerPoint presentation, House Bill 2098. So I was going to share the PowerPoint like this, so I didn't have to present it. It kind of screws up the ability to see Teams and kind of flip back and forth between documents. So I hope that this is kind of good enough for everyone to be able to see the PowerPoint. So before I get into the public comment process and the public comments and kind of what we did there and some of the changes to the draft rule resulting from that, I had some questions that had been posed by a member of the RAC that I kind of wanted to answer up front in the meeting. And the first one was kind of revolves around if these environmental restoration weirs are going to be captured in our fish passage barrier database. And I think this comes from the language in the House and the rules that the department shall maintain a database of projects that apply for implementation under this program. And the current plan is to include those in our fish passage approval database and not the barrier database. With the approval database, we would have a record of where they are all located. That approval database also contains our waivers and exemptions, so it seems like a pretty appropriate spot. And then if in the future we decide that any of these deserve to be in the barrier database, we'd have all the information we would need to put in there. So I hope that answers questions around kind of our data management of these a little bit. And the workload associated with that is pretty minimal. Our approval database is fairly easy to access and get information into in a matter of minutes as we're approving projects and we have all the information. And then the second question that had been submitted was, what does the DSL exemptions actually do? And these are in the House bill in section 4 and 5. And it really just amends the statutes that govern DSL's fill and removal rules. This is a little clip from the House bill. It's the same language in both, and it says that nothing in the statutes between 196.8 and 196.921 apply to fill and removal for projects that are undertaken as part of these voluntary restoration weirs. And so I clipped out kind of the list of all of the statutes that those apply to. I hope that answers kind of the question. It's removing DSL's permitting fill and removal process and oversight.
So Catherine,
So moving on.
Fair to say that these actions would then just be exempt from state lands fill removal rules and regulations as per the House bill, correct? And the statute.
Yes.
Okay.
And Kelly, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wondered if any thought given to asking applicants to take advantage of the fact that OWEB maintains a restoration project database for the Oregon plan. A lot of language in the bill cites Oregon plan approaches. Seems like that might be something that's already in place, and people would be willing to use it.
And our kind of thought about not really requiring them to put that into there, I think hinged around the complications and then the fact that these projects probably, or I don't know, don't necessarily have OWEB funding or the OWEB requirements for that. I think that the database that we will be keeping is much simpler than that, and will kind of hinge on just projects that are approved, the location, the intention, and then the monitoring reports received, the photo point monitoring reports.
Okay, well, yeah, I was thinking about ways to make a more structured monitoring that might have some, it might help with design of a monitoring program. We can talk about that later when we get to the monitoring part.
Okay.
Also, I think it's important to understand that the database was created not just for OWEB funded projects. It was created to try to capture the range of restoration projects statewide.
Yeah, if I might add, that project was started in a cooperative way between ODFW Research and forest industry folks who were beginning projects and wanted a way to document the work they were doing. So it was designed and grew to incorporate an approach that is something landowners can use, land managers can use. It's not all that bad to use it.
Is that something that could be voluntary?
Anything that would make a record where you give the idea the scope of the activity would be helpful.
Okay. And there, I made a comment that we may discuss later around the OWEB photo monitoring requirements, and I like the idea of including those as with the applications, with the approval, as a document that could be referred to help plan, and perhaps, and I haven't looked at the OWEB restoration database recently, but perhaps that could be kind of a similar reference. So. Okay, well, moving on, if there's no other questions, to kind of review the background and what we've been through up to this point with House Bill 2298. The subcommittee meeting on July 27th was dedicated to kind of the kickoff of these draft rules. So you all saw the first draft of those, provided input and recommendations around that, and then they were updated and posted online for a 3-week public comment period that ended the last day in August. So through that process, there were 10 public comments submitted. I listed them here. They were a pretty good representation, I think, of interest in the House bill and the subsequent rules, and certainly kind of covered a wide range of recommendations and thoughts. So including a handful, almost a handful of people that I classified as individuals that weren't necessarily associated with a larger group or representing a larger group. So I posted the public comments online, and then I also posted 2 documents, one that I was calling the summary document. So ODFW reviewed the public comments and summarized each in a table. And then it added some specific responses and comments to each of those kind of summarized comments. So I do want to kind of reiterate here, this is a little bit an interpretation of people's public comments. And so I would really appreciate the RAC, if there, or the subcommittee here, if there is any questions or feedback on how we might have interpreted someone's comment, or if you submitted a comment and you are online watching, listening, would welcome review of our interpretations there. And then the second document that we posted online was the draft rule update. So that included the draft rules, and then I tracked changes with any of the updates or changes that I made based on public comments, and then did make comments on the origin of where some of those changes came from. So that's hopefully to help you all connect the dots through reviewing these and see where some of those came from, and help people that submitted the comments try to see, what actions were made on those comments. And I tried to do it that way based on some of the feedback that had been submitted earlier on the larger rules revision process. So. The public comments, there were some, I want to say, overarching themes, things that we saw repeatedly that I kind of want to address in this PowerPoint, and then maybe we can look at the draft rules and discuss them kind of as we go along here. So one is the application process. So the draft rules include the possibility of, or possible application material in section 2, and we're asking for the applicants to document that their stream meets all the qualifications for the environmental restoration weirs, and that includes OWRD review of the impact to water rights and the flow requirements. It includes county's review of any floodplain requirements, and then information for ODOT to be able to review the potential impact to downstream highway structures. It also has information on the structures that plans to be built, size, material, location, and frequency of the structures in the stream. We added the requirement for pre-project photos for the application. It was part of the monitoring requirements, but it makes sense to submit them in an application. So we had put those there. Just a second. Try to admit people again. And then including information on the rationale of the project, plan land use, approach to future beaver presence, and description of adjacent land use plan. So some of those had been changed from the previous rules based on the public comments. So we received multiple public comments around the desire for really simple application or notification process for these projects. So some of the changes we made were changing a shall to a may to give ODF&W some flexibility around changing the application requirements. And then an informational and descriptive requirement that is intended to be simple, as opposed to the riparian management and land use plan requirement that we had before, that I think was being interpreted as being a more complicated application material. And then we can pull up, I think I'll pull up the language right now and kind of take a look at that. And then if anyone has any comments or questions around that right now, we can discuss. And yeah, so here's the draft rules with the changes in the application process. So it'll be F from here, or the application materials. It'll be F from here down to G. So I'd like to just take a minute and see if any of the members of the committee have any comments around the language here. I did have, later in the presentation, I mentioned that Ken had submitted a request to change this approach to future beaver presence to its own bullet here. And so I do like that idea. Ken did get that. And so I have a note that we can make that change. Yes, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that the approach to future beaver presence is in there, but I would think if I was a landowner, I'd want to know kind of, what do you mean by approach? Can you just, we don't need it in a rule, but you need some sort of guidance so we can review what that might look like.
Yeah, and I'm kind of envisioning something where we ask them, what do you plan to do? You know, do you intend to have beaver return to your property? What do you plan to do if they do? This isn't something that we would evaluate and use to approve or deny a project, but it will help us identify the intention of some of these restoration actions. And you know, if a landowner says in there they have no idea, you know, it would allow us to offer advice or recommendations or start a conversation around what this might look like.
Yeah, several years ago, the department did a survey of landowners around the state, and that might be helpful in that, because there are many cases where landowners were willing to have beavers or would like beavers, or what the threshold was where they didn't want to have anything to do with beavers. And so that might be something worth looking at.
Yeah, I like that idea. Even just, you know, you're putting in these beaver, these weirs that are intended to act as, you know, beavers out on the landscape. Is the intention to bring beavers back, or, you know, not? And I think that that kind of information would be really helpful for the final reports that we're required to submit with recommendations to the legislature at the end of the pilot project. And you know, a few of the other requirements in here, you know, information on land use, you know, just around associated with the weir, things like that would be very helpful for that reporting as well.
You see Ken has his hand up?
I did. I was just about to call him. I was making sure Kelly didn't have a follow-up. So yes, thank you, Ken.
I noticed and was looking through the comments, some consistency in some of the interest comments was making this as straightforward as possible, which is why I've suggested that the department develop an online application form, or something that someone could easily navigate through and do fairly rapidly, either online or download and fill it out without having to do a lot of narrative, etc. So that's just a suggestion on how to help address at least some of the concerns about complexity of application.
Certainly, I was going to revisit that as well. You know, we're working right now on planning an application that would be available online, much like our approval exemption waiver applications are. We are looking at it with an eye to simplicity, and I guess that's still in development. I mean, once these are kind of finalized and, or, you know, accepted going forward, we can work more on getting the application out. And I would like to have, you know, opportunity for it to be reviewed before it starts to get used, so we can get that feedback. And I did try to make it in here a little bit more flexible with ODF and W may require application material including, so that if we find that something's not working or too confusing or just not helpful, that we can easily remove it from the application, not require that in the future.
My only other suggestion is you talk with folks at OWEB who've gone to pretty much online application forms, and they have the might be able to help you with the technology. So, thank you.
If we do go that direction, I would certainly appreciate help with the technology.
That's why they hire young people.
We gotta hire even younger people. So is there any other comments around some of the changes in the application here? Okay, I think I will move on back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so the next kind of big section that we received multiple public comments about included sections 17 or 11 through 17, and that is kind of sections around BMPs of implementing these projects. So we had BMPs in rule on, or we have BMPs in rule on construction timing, erosion control, vegetation removal, work area isolation, and then the machinery operation in the stream. And so a lot of the comments felt that the section kind of circumvented the intention of House Bill 2298, removing it from the DSL fill and removal permit. And a lot of those came from, were inspired by some DSL BMPs. So we did change a lot of the rules in, or a lot of the wording in this language to make it simpler for landers, especially the section about machinery and driving machinery in the stream. And so I am going to pull up that section right now for kind of review and discussion, and then we'll revisit section 11. Okay.
And Catherine, what you're pulling up to review now is what's been on the web since late last week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this shouldn't be new. It's just focusing on the areas that had the most changes. Yeah, so, and then this one was completely changed. I completely rewrote 16, so I want to tee that up as an opportunity for discussion of that. And this essentially removes the requirement for vegetable-based hydraulic fluid in machinery that's going to be drove in the stream channel. And with the understanding that that is likely pretty difficult for landowners, they're probably not running that already. And so this is new BMPs for operating machinery in the stream channel when required. So we have, it needs to be minimized as much as possible. Machinery has to be in good working order and inspected for leaks. And then a requirement to have a spill kit on site, appropriately sized, and these can be purchased from Amazon. So it shouldn't be difficult for landowners to acquire a spill kit in the event that, there is a fuel spillage or hydraulic fluid leaks, and then a requirement that any kind of leak, or if the equipment is found to have any kind of leak, it's removed, and the fuel and contaminated soil must be cleaned immediately. So I wonder if, like to get feedback on the changes here. Perfect. Okay.
Catherine, I was also going to point out, and I think you saw that Fred joined us, but we think Fred has to leave at 3. So in the next 20 minutes or so, maybe make sure we give Fred a chance to comment on anything that he might be missing.
Absolutely, yes. Want to make sure we get your input on this. So I will pause prior to you having to take off and get Fred your, any additional comments or thoughts, and Greg as well, because I know you guys have to leave. So I want to tee up section 11. It's the BMP around planting and removal of brush and trees from the stream bank. So the first section here is pretty much directly out of the House bill. And then the BMPs that we added were kind of A, B, and C here, requiring that brush or trees removed must be replanted with native vegetation, and that the removal of native vegetation shall not be more than required to access the project site. And then it had C, which was removal of brush and trees associated with the project cannot be sold for economic gain. So I had teed this up for discussion during this meeting based on public comment that we received from Sylvie's Valley Ranch, and it was really useful around kind of the thought that removing upland species that are residing in the floodplain might be confusing with this language based on that they're native, but maybe not native to the floodplain. And then adding the requirement that they couldn't sell anything what was not, didn't seem consistent with requirements from the House bill. So I did, since posting the draft rules online, kind of take a stab at some changes to these, and they're kind of, it's revolving around, changed C, first of all, after conversations with ODF about, why I had put that economic gain in there. And it's really just that if there is any sale, barter, or trade of timber material that outside of the Forest Practices Act, there may be some tax liabilities there. And so we're just adding a requirement that if that is what happens to any of this timber that's removed in association with these projects, the state forester needs to be notified to be able to handle that side of things. So I'm going to add that to section 11, and then really kind of pull out this A and B. That's not really associated with the Forest Practices Act. To make these possibly their own BMPs, and then to kind of eliminate the confusion about the amount of vegetation that can be removed in association with these projects, maybe eliminating the word native there. So I think I'm going to tee up discussion around this specifically, and then maybe pause in 10 minutes or so to make sure that Fred gets a chance to comment on kind of anything else. So are there any thoughts on changing 11 in this way or other ways, since this wasn't in the draft rules? If anyone had any other thoughts around it. Ken.
I like your changes. I think linking notification to the forester on materials that are removed that have economic value is a reasonable thing to do. I think the other two issues about brush and tree removal limitations could be combined into one standard and have it separate, so it'd be 11A or 12 or whatever. So I think that's a very reasonable approach. And I think Sylvie's Valley's concern was about juniper, I presume, which is a native, but it's an invasive native when you dry out these flatlands. So I would, and they're juniper generally not covered by the Forest Practices Act, so I would keep that separate. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and the thought being here is we're going to be permitting these weirs, and so the removal of brush and trees with that is associated with the weirs, and then any additional removal beyond that is outside of this, permit, this authorization.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, next hand would be Kelly.
Yeah, Catherine, I like your changes also and the restructuring you suggested. I wish there was a way, I know we were waiting for feedback. I wish there were a way we could all give a thumbs up or thumbs down for each one of these as we work through them. It'd be quicker. But yeah, anyway, yeah, I like what you did.
And Bill.
Yeah, Catherine, on the requirement that there's a replanting with native vegetation, is there going to be any expectation that that replanted vegetation will somehow be protected from things like livestock grazing or other possible activities that will essentially result in removing that same vegetation? I mean, I see some of these environmental restoration weirs as becoming stock ponds where the banks then are immediately just beat down by livestock visiting the backed up water. So how do we protect the replanted native vegetation?
And we didn't really see, within the House bill kind of allowance to be able to require that. That's one of the things that we're requesting in an application is if that kind of protection is going to happen, is going to take place, that the landowner plans on doing that or not. And that's something, if they don't, or they don't have any plan for it, we can recommend that. But also, hopefully if they're only removing brush and vegetation and associated with these weirs, there's not going to be a large area of impact there.
Catherine, one comment I might have is that, I think you're correct. There's nothing in here that would allow us to restrict livestock grazing, but the replanting, I think you could wordsmith that to planted and maintained to ensure survival as an option.
I like that. Okay. And I think at this point, if there's no other comments on section 11, I'd like to pause and we have 15 minutes, I know, until Fred and Greg have to take off. So Fred, I was wondering if you wanted to provide any input on the rules, to have any comments or suggestions, insight before you take off. I didn't want you to feel like you didn't have time, and I'll let you finish chewing your snack there. But I want you to have the opportunity to speak first before I invite Greg to hop on. And you're still muted if you're talking.
Is that better?
That is better, I think. You can hear me now.
Actually, I was grabbing a late lunch there while I got started. Once I finally got my computer to hook up, I really don't have any. It all looks pretty straightforward. The one question I did have, though, is could you clarify for me that these projects still, do they still have to have a federal permit?
If say there were ESA species, if their federal permit would be required, I would say that they would still be required beyond exempting it from the DSL application. And and our review isn't going to take the place of any kind of federal review that would be required. That's my understanding anyways, though I will give Alan a chance to jump in if my understanding is different than his.
No, I think we have language later on that this doesn't take the place of any other permits, whether that's federal permit, shippocultural type stuff. Whether or not a federal permit is required here would be completely independent of this process, is how I would see it, and pretty much how you said it as well.
Okay, that I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Greg, I know you're popping off at 3. Do you have any?
Catherine, I do not at this point. So no, for the sake of time, I do not.
Okay. Well, my next and last slide was really kind of something we already talked about. Ken's suggestions to move its Beaver language to its own number, and then suggested adding requirements for the department to prepare an application. And I was going to ask him for clarity on this. I think, Ken, that you elaborate on this a little bit. My question was going to kind of hinge around, we have applications for our approvals, waivers, exemptions, and don't think we have a requirement to provide those in rule. So I was wondering if you and others feel that this is important to provide in rule, or just important to make sure that we have a downloadable, available online application.
If you plan to have an application, let me start over. At OWEB, it was by rule that we had an application. The application included X, Y, and Z. In this instance, if you plan to have an application format that is easily usable by the public, there's, it's probably not necessary to add it to the rules. It's just trying to find a way to make sure that this is readily accessible to the public who might use it. So I'm not going to fall on any sword over rule language on application forms.
And I guess from my perspective, I don't think we would commit to guarantee that there's an online application form right now without knowing the technology formats, associated expenses that go with that. We will certainly have a downloadable option like Catherine alluded to, but yeah, I don't
posted online.
We need this. I don't know that we need this level of detail requiring us to have an online application in rule, not knowing what. Yeah, we'll have a form.
And my concern around an online application is, we don't really have a great idea on how many people, landowners will be kind of pursuing these projects, and the time that it might take to create an online application, and whether or not that would be quick to adapt, as people start to use it. Certainly, we will have a downloadable form available online, though.
Like I said, I'm not going to fall on any sword.
Well, beyond that, we kind of did the summary of the public comments and then presented some of the rules around those. There are additional rule changes in here that I didn't specifically tee up in the PowerPoint. And there's a couple of different ways I kind of wanted to pose to the group of, reviewing these. If we should start kind of at the top and scroll down through and review line by line or comment by comment, change by change, or we could do kind of a round table like we did with Fred and call on each of you to provide your comments. And I may vote for kind of a round table first, and then if things start to get complicated or we bounce around too much, switching to kind of a line by line, if anyone has any thoughts one way or another. Since no one objects to doing a round table, I've already called on Fred, so I think I'll go down the line and call on April. If April is there, she might have stepped away, or she's still muted. We'll come back to April. Bill.
Bear with me because I'm struggling. I like everything I see. I'm struggling with one fundamental question. And Catherine, either you or somebody else in this group are going to be able to answer this for me very quickly. And so excuse my ignorance. But I'm struggling all the way right back at the discussion of what is an environmental restoration weir, and the fact that it can't be something subject to the regulatory authority of the Department of Water Resources, which is the Water Rights Permitting Authority. And I did a little reading on that and discovered that what Water Resources does regulate and permit are ponds. Starting in, I guess, 1997, any new pond, and it's a little fuzzy about what a pond is required to get a water rights permit, or at least go through the process. And can you explain to me, somebody explain to me, Alan, somebody explain to me how the backing up of water behind this weir, even if it's still having some water flowing through the weir, is not a pond subject to water rights? And that's the only question I have. It's a fundamental question for me about whether or not what we're creating here are ponds, while maybe ephemeral in nature or rather fluid in nature. They're still ponds subject to water resources regulatory authority.
So I pulled up the definition of environmental restoration weir, and it's really A here that tries to get to that. And this is straight out of the House bill. I think this is certainly something that they had multiple discussions around in the first, iterations of this bill in previous years, so that these would be for the purpose of delaying a slowing, but not preventing stream flow. So I think that's trying to get to that. And then we just reviewed the application requirements, and we did receive some comments from OWRD, and we have had kind of multiple conversations with them about this. So the landowner will be going to OWRD and getting documentation that their proposed structure would not either require a water right or injure surrounding water rights, or is unlikely to. They wanted the opportunity for that review and input. So as currently written, we have that requirement in the application, and then it also has that proposed project would not require a water right under Oregon statute.
So by writing this in as it's currently written, the suggestion is that the applicant will go to the Water Resources Department to ascertain whether or not a permit is required.
That's the intention.
Okay,
that's our intention.
That's the intention of it. Because as best I can puzzle out reading Water Resources provisions about ponds, that a pond does not necessarily permanently store water, and a pond can be just a wide spot in the otherwise flow of water where water is expanded beyond the stream bed. And that sure sounds like some of these restoration weirs. So that I was concerned that we were going to suggest that this was not necessarily going to have to go through Water Resources, but at the same time, what we're going to be looking at are ponds that are created by a structure that, while it allows water to pass through it, so it only slows or delays, it doesn't do anything differently than a lot of other ponds on other drainages, which slow water but allow water to pass through or over. So I was concerned that we were going to open this up to where people were going to think this was a completely different creature than a pond, and find themselves not realizing that they still had to coordinate with water resources about whether or not this was by definition going to become a pond and subject to permitting standards.
And
So-
it's precisely because of some of that language that was in the rule that we have included this in the application material. You know, ODFW certainly is not going to be evaluating these for whether or not a water right is required, or if they're, you know, one way or the other, or if they're likely to injure downstream water rights or kind of meet that flow requirements. And so those were, you know, comments from OWRD, and we've discussed kind of methods for how to proceed with the application review so they had the opportunity to document that these structures would qualify
Okay, so
as an environmental restoration area.
are we going to be looking at an applicant to go ahead, either notify directly water resources, or we will notify water resources that an application has been made, and at least water resources then is aware of the possibility, and whatever happens after that is on them?
We are going to be asking them to get OWRD approval or sign off or documentation prior to applying to us that their structure will meet the qualifications outlined in the House bill. And we plan on in the application having, you know, the information for the contact person for, you know, the area so that they know who they would need to go to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, this was to me a fundamental question that I was hoping we could get past. And other than that, I think the whole package looks very good. Thank you.
Before we move on to Kelly or Kim, Bill, the other thing I was going to add is Catherine and I did meet with the Eastern Oregon OWRD manager way early on in this process before we really kicked this off. And he did go over that, you know, these structures can delay or slow, but not store. There is some fine interpretation that OWRD uses, but that's exactly why ODFW won't be interpreting, you know, OWRD language as far as what requires a water right or not, and we'll be going to OWRD. The other thing we talked about is the photo points and the annual photo point monitoring that we have. We'll be providing that to OWRD. So if the structure changes over time, if OWRD sees from the photo point monitoring that, you know, this appears to be a diversion, you know, there can be some follow-up with that, but yeah, that's the intention for, and OWRD wanted that review and opportunity as well.
Okay, thanks, Alan.
And I guess I will also say that they did offer, and I plan to take them up on reviewing the section of the application that we're going to put together that, you know, the applicants can take to them and have them fill out. So hoping to make that as easy and straightforward as possible, and certainly plan to continue to have that connection in those conversations.
Got it.
And then now we can go on to Kelly, who has his hand raised and has been waiting very patiently. Thank you, Kelly.
No, thanks. After reading the bill more times and this clarification of DSLs kind of doesn't kind of opt out of much engagement in this process at all, we're really constrained in what we can say in these rules in our guidelines. I mean, to call it, it's called environmental restoration, but that implies that we're dealing with not just retaining flows for a while, but the land management, the animals that live there, the plants, all the rest. So the glib suggestion is, what is environmental restoration weir? It's an oxymoron as that's driving this bill. And by that, I mean, it doesn't allow us to address the other factors that are acknowledged to have caused the degradation in the first place, including land management or land use practices upstream of the private property that these weirs are on. So how do we make the best of that? Well, one suggestion is one thing is get an idea of what they're real interested in. We know it's been a passion of Vasili's landowner, but how widespread is this? So the follow-up will be when we get around to talking about monitoring. We need to know how many people are interested, what are the outcomes they're expecting, and what are the outcomes they get. And this isn't just from a conservation point of view. This is also from the point of the landowners who may engage in these practices, invest a lot of time and effort, and not get the results they want. So we need to do that. And the last group that needs to be worried about how you're going to measure this are staff at ODFW. Now, Greg's going to bow out. He's not going to be around. But in 7 to 15 years, you're going to have to write reports saying what happened and what difference did it make. And if you don't have the information other than 4 points, that's just going to be, nobody's going to buy it. You know, you're not going to be able to change anything based on the results as described in here. So my real axe to grind, my real important issue is surround around the part that says ODFW may require and the third party monitoring, things like that. So I'll save the rest of my spiel for that. But it's clear that we bought this thing. Some people call it a greenwashing of a, you know, of a land practice designed to increase forage. We don't. That's water over the weir. So let's just see what we can make out of it, so we have something to say later. That's my spiel. I had to get it off my chest.
Yes, and I did want to ask you. I have up on the screen here. So in the application material, I'm planning on asking for a description of the current habitat conditions, rationale for the project, and intended impacts in the environmental restoration weir. They can provide that in the application. That doesn't get to your question of if that actually happened. And we certainly, as written in rule, can't require some kind of a restoration or habitat improvement report, but we can ask, you know, as these projects go along, how it's working, and see if landowners want to provide a voluntary update. There is also still the possibility of the third party monitoring, and that is something that you know, on the landscape there, we're requiring photo point monitoring for 10 years. At any point during that time, if third party monitoring becomes a possibility, we can negotiate that with the landowner and have a third party go out there to monitor, you know, conditions of interest to try to determine some of that impact of the environmental restoration weir, and if it had the intended impact or not. I know that doesn't get to all of your comments, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on kind of how we've been envisioning how this might work and how we may be able to get more information beyond just the photo point monitoring. And then Ken. Ken, you're muted.
I'm trying. Actually, I'm going back to the Water Resources Department. I think it would be wise to have, as part of the application, just a certification page that would be required to be filled out by Water Resources Department that would certify so that there would be would or wouldn't be injury, there would or wouldn't require a permit, etc. So that it's a part of the application materials that is available to the landowner that would be required to be filled out by Water Resources Department, submitted as part of the application. Because I think if the earlier you get that information, the better off you are.
That sounds.
I won't go to Kelly's point about how you might look at the whole program's effectiveness.
Well, to your point about the sign off for the Water Resource Department, as I understand it, that sounds like exactly what we're sort of envisioning having, a sign off that the landowner can either fill out and they can verify, or the landowner can take to them and have them fill out, or they can provide something that covers the same information with the sign off by OWRD.
And I would suggest that you work with OWRD on a certification form so that there is a standardized form that fits with every application so that there be uniformity across the Southeast.
Yeah, we
Thanks.
certainly want it to be something that would work for them as well. And I think that that would address that. April, I see your hand up.
Thanks. I just wanted to add, I would check with Raquel Rancier since I think she's been most involved in this issue currently and previously from Water Resources Department. But I'll just offer just a little bit of perspective from my experience with this issue in the past that I appreciate the comments that have been made, and just to be clear, we weren't involved with this legislation and in its previous iterations in efforts to have more of a statewide type process that has brought up a lot of issues. And I think that the way that this is constructed, being narrow and having appropriate guidelines and agency involvement is appropriate. But I think just for others on the task force, that this legislation has come up, I think this was the third time in which it had been through the legislative process and came close to passing previously before. And so there's been discussions in that arena, and then there's been work groups, and then there was I think a year-long DSL facilitated process when there was this effort to do more statewide. And so I mentioned that because I know some of you were involved in some of those discussions, and some of you may not be aware that some of those discussions have occurred. And I think particularly when it is kind of a novel approach to certain things, want to make sure that we're leaving things flexible enough. I don't want to dictate what would be good for Water Resources Department, and that's why I suggest talking to Raquel. I'm supportive of the language that you've put forward in this regard, and I think it should be left to similar with you guys as far as you may require an application process. What my afternoon brain is catching up here is if you're only going to have one project that comes through this, it would be a waste of y'all's time to have a whole application. So I would say maybe wait on that part.
Certainly, making an application, draft application to be used is something we plan on having hopefully by the time the rules are finalized. But I agree, any kind of, say, online application or something more in depth will, if we see a huge amount of interest, updating the application and expanding it would be something that we would be able to do at that time, I think. And then while you, April, were on the line, we're kind of doing a roundtable, and since you were just talking, I was going to go ahead and open it up. I think you, if you had anything else to say in terms of the rest of the rules or any other thoughts or input beyond kind of what we had been discussing there with OWRD and the application.
I think, Catherine, you've done a good job of trying to capture the various comments that you've received, and taking off my day job hat, so to speak, and looking at this as a task force member. I think you've got some good stuff here, and again, just kind of echoing my previous comments, this is going to be a new process, and it's going to involve different agencies are going to be involved in any environmental restoration WEIR project. And I think if there's success and interest in having other places do these types of things, then that's something that'll spark additional conversation. But I think it's like with other Oregon programs that are new, it's important, I think, to leave some time and see how things evolve, and not make things more complicated if they don't have to be.
Thank you, April. Let's see, next on my list for roundtable is Kelly. If you have anything else, you did hint at a teaser earlier that you had something else to say later. So I think now is your opportunity.
Sure. This is Kelly. Well, I kind of agree with this approach that April talked about. I mean, this bill is a long time in the development. I'm aware of most of the background. And it was a lot of changes have been made to make it, to get to where we're at. I just think that given the support in the legislature for this bill, and it was signed by the governor, I propose that we leave, your comments are good. I think your editing has been appropriate. But out of this, we need to continue to support to evaluate. We need to know, first of all, how many people are going to be doing this. So that requires reporting. That shouldn't be negotiable to any great extent. Then also, is there enough interest to warrant expansion to other parts of the state? Is there enough success to warrant that? Those are questions that need to be answered. And I think that after we run this program for a little while, we see the interest, be entirely appropriate to work with OWEB or even through a program option package to the legislature, that we provide funding to do some monitoring of these projects in a way that tells us what we're getting. And I think it's only reasonable. I think that we don't want to write that into the rule, but we need to support the monitoring language that is there and make a recommendation to the commission that they pursue that in the future should there be enough interest. That's it.
And I also think that there's two reporting deadlines here. One, I believe, is 5 years after implementation or something. So that was a good time to take a look at this and be able to evaluate, the interest and specific changes that may be more appropriate at that time, and reiterate that if we haven't seen the kind of monitoring or information come out of this that we would like to see.
Yeah, I would even, in my suggestions about who do the monitoring, the Gordon Grant and his postdoc and others, that a group like that, or a different OSU group. I'm not saying it has to be the state doing the monitoring, and I don't think the focus should be on compliance with the rules, and that which would bother landowners. And I don't think it's necessary to go into much detail there. But is it worth it? Is it working, or is it just a good idea that somebody wanted to try and didn't work out? We don't know right now because the objectives aren't clear, and we haven't applied it widely enough to know what might happen. So that's I think the group might agree with most of that, and we could make that kind of a recommendation coming out of the full task force.
Yes, I like the idea, and also you kind of alluded to it there, but the House bill, stipulates that third-party monitoring cannot pose a cost to the landowner. ODFW doesn't currently have funding to do the monitoring or fund monitoring, but that doesn't mean that somebody else who may have an interest in doing monitoring these kind of projects cannot come forward and present themselves as a third party. It does need to be mutually agreed upon, but there's room in there for monitoring from other areas as well.
Yes, I recall that language. I think that's an opening that could work out for everyone.
And I think it's similar to that implementation of the project. It would be really interesting to see the interest in that. And we just don't have a handle on that right now. So, Bill, I see that you just raised your hand.
Well, I just wanted to follow up to see if I'm following where Kelly's going, because I've struggled with the same problem here. If we don't have clearly established objectives defining success, how do we know we ever get there? I mean, the whole world struggles with this concept of doing things with unclear objectives defining what success is going to be. And I guess in this context, even with monitoring of the ongoing projects and perhaps even monitoring of the project over time, what is our definition of the success of this environmental restoration weir? Is that also part of your problem, Kelly, with this?
Yeah, that is my problem in particular, is that we don't even know what we're looking for. It's not in the bill. It's curious that there's not, the closest it comes is interest in raising the current stream bed up to the historic floodplain. That'd be a start, but I think there's other objectives that could be identified that we want to follow up on.
Would, trying to brainstorm, that be something that we could add? I know under the third-party monitoring language in the rules here, we have, you know, things that we would like to see monitored in terms of reaction to the environmental restoration weir. And I think we have that as a may. Monitoring may include kind of a list of things, including riparian vegetation and stream habitat and temperature and water quality. So beyond that, you're thinking something more specific, or are you thinking outside of rules in terms of guidance?
I think you captured some of that elsewhere in this document. Beyond that, I think Kelly has some great suggestions that I don't know that we'd put them in the rules, but as far as working on either a policy option package or some sort of a OWEB program or others to, you know, find the funds to do to try and find the funds to do more monitoring than is currently, you know, prescribed in the House bill. I think Kelly threw out some great suggestions there to try and develop. I thought you had that somewhere in here, and then we also have Terry with his hand up now too.
Hi there. Would the objectives of the project be part of the application process, so that you'd have to state what the goals are for implementing an environmental restoration weir on the stream bed?
I did have that as part of the application process of,
Okay.
Yeah, intention, planned effect. Can't remember how I worded it now, just scrolled away from that, but that was part of what I wanted to have is you know,
If the owner's, you know, trying to state that or required to state that up front, then that's something you could monitor against. So if it's in there, I think that's a good start.
Yeah, I was trying to find where I also had some of the monitoring language in here. Oh, here. But yeah, I like in the application to know, you know, what the landowner is intending to get out of the action, and then that can be something that is followed up on or used in the future for third-party monitoring to kind of maybe develop some of those measurements of success. And thank you, Alan, for capturing Kelly's input more succinctly than I had. So, Ken, your hand is up.
Yes, I think Kelly's asking a broader question about what's the intention of environmental restoration weirs, and I would imagine, like almost all legislative efforts, there's multiple intentions, and So another question that I think is relevant is what's the public benefit versus the public impacts of such efforts? So I would struggle with how you do that, but I do think maintaining the opportunity for independent monitoring is really valuable because that might provide some feedback while the individual landowner's intentions are useful and you can monitor against those. The real question is what's the public benefit versus private benefit versus public cost, etc.
I agree.
And also, none of that relates to the rules.
Okay. Kind of lost track of who I've called on for our roundtable here. I think, Ken, you were next. If you had anything additional.
I've said way too much already, so I'll shut up.
Okay, then Terry, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. I really don't have anything to add other than, our organization was involved with some of the previous versions of this legislation. And one of the reasons I think that it didn't pass was that they were too broad and permissive and lacked appropriate review from ODFW and Water Resources. I think the latest version does have adequate review processes in place. So I think this is something that we can work with, and I'll leave it at that. I think we're good.
Have I missed anyone on the subcommittee and the kind of the roundtable discussion here? And then is there any other discussion? Anyone would like to tee up questions, comments, ways forward here? Sections of rule that you may want to look at? Alan?
Well, Kaz, I think you kind of laid out your timeline at the beginning. The plan was to go through the rules with the group here today. We'll take all of that into account along with the comments. The plan was to do additional revisions to the rules, eventually put those back out for public comment. We also still have the public comment today that we will get to here in a little bit, with the intention of taking this to the full task force in December and then the commission in the spring. So we haven't heard a lot of I mean, we've certainly heard concerns around monitoring, but I guess I haven't heard a lot of opposition in the discussion today to the rules that you have them as drafted, knowing that we still we'll make some fine tuning of them. Unless I'm missing something here, we can get into the public comment, where I do expect to hear some healthy comments from members of the public that are here today. And again, when we put it back out, I think we're surprisingly, although I don't think you warned this might happen, I was not expecting. We are running well ahead of time here, but we can certainly, if there's no other comments from the task force, we can start with the public comment process, and that may likely generate additional discussion.
Good point. Well, I will, I guess, close my shared screen at this point. So you guys don't all just see me scrolling around. Is that closed now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then, yeah, let's open it up for public comments. Raise your hand if you'd like to provide public comment. Rocky Dallum.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Hopefully you can hear me. My audio's through the phone and my video's through the screen. Appreciate the deep discussion and the changes. I think I'm here on behalf of Sylvia's Valley Ranch, just for the record, Rocky Dahlem. One place that wasn't discussed that I noted in the rules that's in the Sylvie's comment is Section 8 around fish passage. Would encourage the department to look closely at the statute. There's a difference between sections 5.4 and 5, or subsections. I think it's section 2, subsections 5.4 and 5.5. One requiring fish passage and one that does not require fish passage per the statute, but changes that are economically feasible. So I think you want to at least look more deeply into whether or not the department has the authority to implement either fish passage requirements or seeking a waiver where the statute intentionally omits it. But we're still reviewing the comments. Want to thank you and Greg and your team's work for updating a lot, incorporating a lot of the feedback that we made, and some of the discussion today around having a program that's accessible, and I think some of the changes that made the application permissive are a good step forward. But we'll continue to follow the process and monitor, but those places where there may be requirements that are specifically omitted by statute, would love for you to take a little bit of a look on, and happy to always talk offline. But thanks for the time and the continued work on this, and the effort that the task force and the subcommittee and that you and the department are putting into this.
Yeah, thank you. And I may be interested in talking offline. Just kind of real briefly wanted to say as far as the addition for options of waivers and exemptions at those, or the sections that you referenced, and was kind of intending for it to be additional options, I think, in those sections. But I will go back and take a look, and would get a hold of you. Have any additional questions around that? And then Brian.
Yeah, hi everybody. Brian Posowitz on behalf of Water Watch of Oregon. Yeah, let me just say, I guess first of all, that I appreciate all the detailed consideration of the public comments that have been submitted in this round as well as in the prior round. I feel like the comments we submitted and the comments I saw from others were given good consideration, and that they in fact resulted in many changes to the draft rules, and we don't always see that in a public process for rulemaking. The one comment I would make on the substance, or the one suggestion I'd make right now, like Rocky, I'm still kind of looking at and digesting a lot of this, and this is kind of getting down the weeds a little bit, in the draft rule 635-412-00452G, which is where it says the proposed project will not require a water right under ORS 537. I would just encourage substitution of the language from the bill, which says would not, quote, store or appropriate water in a manner that would require a permit from the Water Resources Department. Just because the term water right can be kind of a term of art, and the language from the statute I think is a little bit broader, a little more inclusive. And then it may be, off the top of my head, I mean, I think any permit that would be required would be in Chapter 537, but I'm not 100% sure, so I don't see the need to narrow it. I would just use the statutory language. And let's see, I think that language is also consistent with the language right above it in the draft rules, where it talks about what would need to be in the application. And I think that's all I have. I did want to respond to the issue I think Rocky's raising about fish passage, where It's not required initially because there are no native migratory fish present. But they later show up, then what happens? Well, and the way I think the bill reads it, that ODFW can either require passage that's, economically feasible, I forget the exact words, or require mitigation that provides a net benefit to native migratory fish. I think that's the statute provides that option to the department. And I do think, that is really just an incorporation of the waiver standard. And so, I think to me, it's okay to just put in the rules as an alternative. The department can require, a waiver. So that's my impression of that. Thanks for the chance to comment.
Thank you, Brian. There's no new hands up, but Rocky, you still have your hand up, Brian as well. So if you don't want to provide additional comments, you can put your hands down. And Ken has raised his hand. So I'll call on you, Ken.
Being a pain in the butt, I will continue. The language of the project will not require a water right under OS 537 came directly from Water Resources Department's comments. So you might want to clarify that with Raquel or others at Water Resources Department. So I noticed you'd adopted the specific language that OWRD requested, and so I think that's relevant, but there may be other provisions of the statute that would be relevant as Brian raises.
I think that's a good point, Ken, and a good idea to go back to them and kind of review some of this language and the language that's in the bill and see if there's a preference or a way to mesh them, or making sure that there's not an unintended consequence in the language that they've provided. Brian, is your hand up again?
Yes, can I respond to that real briefly? Yes, so yes, I do appreciate that language was put in at the request of the Water Resources Department, and I think sometimes people just get a little loose when they throw around the term water right, which there can be arguments about exactly what that means. And I would just say that as between the language that's in the bill and what Water Resources Department suggested, that that the language in the bill is probably what ought to govern. And honestly, I don't think they would have an objection to changing the language to be consistent with the bill, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
And I think it would be really easy to reach out to them and have this conversation with them. There are no more hands raised. I think we have a couple people on the phone. So if you're unable to raise your hands, you may chime in. And I apologize because I know some of you couldn't get into the meeting. Hearing nothing. And April has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Is this the appropriate time for me to chime in?
I think so. Closing out the public comments, going to reopen it for discussion from the subcommittee. So yes, go ahead.
Okay. I do not envy you trying to manage who's got what going on and who needs to talk and all that stuff. So one of the thoughts I had, or questions I should say, when folks were talking is, Catherine, you had mentioned earlier you spoke to Water Resource Department, one of their manager folks, assuming Kyle or somebody like that over in the region. it doesn't matter. But I would suggest that again, checking in with Raquel or some other folks out of the director's office, I think would be helpful. And I don't have any knowledge on this one. I'm just saying based on other experiences I've had that sometimes the regional manager or on the ground folks may have a different perspective or different word choices than someone like Raquel or another policy person might have. So just saying that because I was listening to the comments that were made and could kind of go either way as far as the language there. So just thought that might be helpful.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So Catherine, looking at where we're at on the agenda, we kind of missed the 10-minute break. We can certainly take a break. I'm not seeing other hands coming up. I don't know if we had any new issues for consideration. I think Kelly kind of brought up a new issue for consideration as far as the OWEB and our POP, our other funding mechanisms to get into a more detailed monitoring funded outside of the landowner. We do have on the agenda a 4:30 public comment period, so at least we'll want to keep this open, and you and I will certainly be on here at 4:30 in case someone didn't participate in the meeting but wanted to log in at 4:30 to provide public comment. We could certainly entertain a break and see if there's any other new issues for considerations. And we've reviewed the timeline, I believe, and have a meeting recap, and then stay live. At least for those of us that plan to stay on here, can stay live for the 4:30 public comment period if there's any new commenters that come along. I thought I saw someone from Onda on here earlier that I know commented, but I don't see him on here anymore.
Hopefully.
So that's one option.
So are you proposing we take a break and then come back and see if inspiration has struck, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back and revisit this, see if anyone new has joined the meeting, and go from there. See everyone in 10 minutes. I think that's the end of the 10-minute break. I see Alan's made it back. Hopefully everyone else has made it back. Like to give anyone an opportunity to chime in at this point. And then during break, Alan and I kind of discussed ways forward here with the meeting. And given that we had the agenda online with a 4:30 public comment, we're going to keep the meeting open unless somebody gets very, verbose and wants to have a discussion for half hour. But we'll take a moment here and see if there's any additional hands raised. But I think we can adjourn or end the meeting at this point, and I will stay on. You're more than welcome to stay on as well for a half hour to make sure that nobody comes in at the 4:30 public comment period to provide any kind of insight. And then if that does happen, I will provide that out to the members of the committee and post it online.
And the other thing we've got going on is the meeting is being recorded. We don't have any actions coming up that require a quorum here today. So we certainly didn't want to keep all of you on the meeting waiting for the 4:30, but we will certainly, at least Catherine and I will be online at 4:30 in case someone that wasn't in the meeting wanted to provide any comment then.
We just talk about the weather. It's going to rain. Bill.
A quick one, Catherine. You mentioned that we were going to be bringing this to the full task force in December. What was the date on that meeting or potential meeting?
That's the 3rd.
Okay. Thank you.
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second Ken's motion.
Feel free to.
Motion's carried, and Catherine, thanks for the work you put in ahead of time. I think it really helped us get through this much more quickly.
Thanks,
and
Kelly.
effectively. Way to go.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll be in touch and certainly let you know ASAP if we get any comments at 4:30.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.